So at the point this video is out, Honkai Star Rail's 3.2 update will be out, which includes a new character in the form of Castorice, a character from the Amphorius area, planet thing, which is basically what if ancient Greece, but space. Anyway, Castorice is like a death person or something. I'm not far enough in the story to understand, although there are other reasons to not get it that I'll be getting into next week, thus further pushing back the video that I was going to make about Janssen to the point where I may as well not even make it. But the chief aspect of Castorice that I want to talk about is one of the new gameplay abilities that she has. Castorice, once per combat, can revive characters. You know, that's pretty neat. We've seen that a couple of times before, although if she's supposed to have ties with like the god of death, but only the one on Amphorius or whatever the fuck is going on with that shit, it doesn't really make that much sense, although it does seem to... being told she doesn't even need to be in the party to do this. Okay, that's a little bit new. Let's talk about that. Alright, let's talk about overall, in the grand scheme of things, what this type of ability is. This is something known as a global passive, or a passive ability that is usable no matter who is in your party, and to some, the fact that it is a global passive at all is enough to make this a severe detriment to Honkai Star Rail. Now we'll get into the nuances of whether that's true or not in this case later in the video. For now, I want to discuss the concept as a whole, because I think characters can have global passives if they're used responsibly. I'd like to go to Genshin Impact to point this out, because there are actually a lot of global passives in that game, mostly coming from older characters. Now, the majority of you who don't watch Saint Totas because you dismiss him as a Kurobot or something will probably be wondering what the fuck I'm talking about. But before I explain, hey, Saint Totas, could you not cut me off to make what I'm saying about you? I know you're going to. In fact, you probably just did when I brought you up. So it's probably too late for that, but I figured I should say it since I know it's going to happen. Cloud chasing aside, now I can explain why characters like Albedo, Ayaka, Sucrose, Dori, Yunjin actually all have global passives. And some of you who know Genshin well are probably starting to see where I'm going with this, but let me get the casuals up to speed real quick. See, all of these characters have abilities that work in crafting or cooking, and although you have to select the character you're using to craft items, there's really no restriction on it if you can use these characters or not. Other than, of course, the fact that these passive abilities can't really stack with each other, which also means that multiple characters having the same passive ability doesn't help your account, at least in terms of that passive, but instead serves as just an option, even if it's one that's ultimately completely and utterly pointless to choose between, other than what character you want for, let's say, different reasons. I'd argue that the signature dishes of various characters would also qualify under this, although since everybody kind of does the same thing in this regard, just with different dishes, it creates less of a disparity in account power level for if you can make the funny puppy hash browns or the funny unicorn rice. This also applies in the exploration mission thing that you do that I think some people really don't like and think is stupid. And you can agree or disagree with that, with some characters being able to get bonus materials and others being able to explore faster, with some of these being locked by region. So it's something that affects your account, but much like with the crafting, does so in a minor way, and also tends to replace an overworld exploration ability, like being able to catch crystal flies easier, or showing you certain types of resources on the minimap. We'll get into how uneven this trade-off may actually be in some cases later, but the important thing for now is that we're exchanging one degree of utility for another on a relatively even scale. This leads to the crux of the main problem with Castorice's revive ability. Let's start with the power level of this in relation to something like a chance to get extra resources when converting them into higher rarity ones. right? So this is just like objectively more powerful than if your weapons are leveled up or you've been hoarding the materials you need already. You probably aren't worried about getting extra materials for crafting up. And if you don't even use food very often, even the signature dishes are unlikely to affect your gameplay. It's a nice touch, don't get me wrong, but these things pale in comparison to being able to revive at least one character. I will be fair though, because this is less powerful than Gepard or Maide's personal revives, and Bailu's one-shot revive, both of which restore HP in and of themselves, while Castorice needs you to heal or shield a character within a certain time frame, or they just go outright back down again. So, you know, it's not as powerful as one of the few cases that you have a revive ability actually on your team, although the fact that HSR tends to hold revival abilities at a bigger premium than most other things is indicative of how powerful this is to have on a global at all, if I'm being perfectly honest. But then I do have to go back to the idea of it being a trade-off, right? In the case of Genshin, there's a specific slot for passive abilities like this called the utility passive, and Honkai Star Rail doesn't have that, but does have a slot for talent, which is the basis behind pretty much the whole passive kit for the character, and Castorice is now the only character that has two of them. Now, in theory, there's still a good way to balance that out. The talent for in-combat abilities is weaker, thus resulting in the two talents having a balance of 1. Well, I mean, Castorice is a remembrance character, so what the fuck do you think they did? Yeah, the revive is just in addition to any normal character's kit, so there's no real power trade-off happening here that makes this not power creep. And even then, by the way, trading something that you can use even without having the character in, like, it would have to be weaker than stuff that you're having to have the character in the party for it to not have some kind of disparity there naturally. So the disparity would still be there. It's still there in Genshin when they do it. The chief difference in these two situations is really the degree by which the disparity exists. And all of that brings me to addressing the counter argument that I hear most often in regards to this global passive. It's not that big of a deal because content doesn't typically kill your characters. In fact, if anything, because Castorice's kit involves draining your whole party, you're actually going to get more out of the global passive when you have her on the team, since you'd be more likely to knock out your party members, especially multiple at once, with her in the party than on the sidelines. And that's kind of right. When reading the full text of how the revive works, it's a little bit of a quality of life improvement. For now, at least. And there's a few ways to counter that argument. I mean, for one, Genshin Impact Zhongli exists. Do we want to talk about the fact that making dodging attacks irrelevant is something that Genshin Impact did by making Zhongli's shield as powerful as it was? But let's go in a different direction. Let's not pretend that this game in particular has never introduced something that just clears content more efficiently and then ups the difficulty when those who don't have the most powerful way of beating the content struggle more with it. This hand wave of you can still beat the content with older characters that people use a lot is barely valid in Genshin, or even other cases in Honkai Star Rail, especially as of Natlan, by the way, in Genshin's case. And it's been proven to be temporary at best in the case of Zenless Zone Zero and Honkai Star Rail. And this is just Hoyoverse games, by the way, where I talk about that. Because what Hoyoverse winds up doing is rebalancing the content for more powerful teams and units, which is, you know, exactly what someone should expect to happen when new units outshine old ones to a high degree. It's expected that content will get harder for the skill floor when the skill ceiling goes up, because without that, you lose the interest of the players closer to that skill ceiling. And when that skill ceiling is directly correlated to what premium units you have, it does get a bit dicey. We've already seen HP bloat. Hey, how do you feel about one-shots in Memory of Chaos? just saying. Now, admittedly, everything that I'm saying does have a little bit of a risk of coming across as a slippery slope fallacy, but if the slope is known to have a leaky ceiling above it when it rains, then I don't think it's wrong to point out that people shouldn't be walking towards it when you can hear rain outside. You'd normally do that with a wet floor sign, although that's more effective before anyone's been hurt, because it actually prevents the slippery slope from being a problem, which is what my point is doing. I do actually kind of agree that this global passive is relatively minor, again, for now. Even if they don't escalate the content difficulty because of it, the tool of giving premium units extra functionality for just having them on your account is there. They can do this again, and with effects that are a lot more meaningful, and it may not even be obvious as a universal attack buff or crit buff or whatever. Let me provide a kind of detailed example of a possible scenario where this could happen. Just work with me here. Right, so Castorice's global passive doesn't just benefit her in a team, but also benefits other teams that use HP as a resource. So those built around destruction units like Mayday and even Blade, as out of the meta as he is, because it gives those strategies that already want to operate on the razor's edge more of a safety net. So what if we have a global passive that triggers when you do a follow-up attack, or a certain number of them, or even just does a follow attack himself? Let's assume this is a male character so that people will actually gravitate towards it instead of hating it. Or one that triggers when you break an enemy, maybe. That's another example. Suddenly, any account that has these characters gets a buff to teams like Fua and Super Break, respectively. Now, let's think about Acheron for a second. You know a global passive that would buff her? Something that applies a very minor debuff on an enemy consistently. Oh, sure, the debuff does, like, barely anything, but Acheron wants it to be there. Now, doesn't she? Better pull this premium unit then, no matter what else is in the kit. And if you're using an Acheron team and you don't have this unit, too bad. You're behind, and the content is probably going to balance around those that do have the unit when a piece of endgame content is designed to want you to use dot teams. And it doesn't even take the abilities being powerful for that to be the case. Now, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom. I'm not really saying that this is a death knell for Honkai Star Rail at this point, although I do very well understand some people wanting to quit because of it, because, well, the warning signs are there and shouldn't be ignored. I'm far enough in the story to know that being near Castorice is enough for the life to drain from anything around her, and part of what I'm hoping is that what we're seeing isn't a meta-narrative told through that piece of lore. But what do you think? Are you quitting Honkai Star Rail because of Castorice? Or are you in the camp of this not being a big deal? Feel free to make fun of me for being a Blade main in the comments, and be sure to leave a like on your way out. But until next time, this is the effing Boonslayer, signing out.